If, as consumers, we enable AI to transact on our behalf, then suddenly a lot of that detection that we do, which is looking at human behavior, whether they're being manipulated or whether they're being taken over, becomes now something that you have to look at the behavior of machines.
Welcome to this episode of the Fin Podcast. It's Dan Holmes here from Feedzai, and today it's a real pleasure to be joined by Gareth. Gareth, please say hi, introduce yourself, tell us a bit about where you've been in industry.
Hi, Dan. Yes, Gareth Evans. So, Dan and I have been around for quite some time, both part of the same...
Not that old.
Lloyds. So, actually, I've been around a lot longer. I think my first sort of introduction to all this was back in the Millennium Bug, if you remember that, back in 1999. So that's definitely going back a bit. And now I am heading up the Fraud Centre of Excellence at PwC in the Czech Republic. So we partner with Feedzai. We are your support and implementation partners. And I largely head up that Feedzai relationship across the PwC network. So any part of the world where PwC has a fraud opportunity with Feedzai, then I liaise on that. And so I kind of know you guys pretty well by now.
Yeah, and a practice and a powerhouse the size of PwC, Gareth, you must have had a real choice of who you wanted to strike up that relationship with in the market. What was it about Feedzai that really kind of drew you guys towards wanting to work more closely with the technology?
The reality is we get exposed to every vendor in this space. And, we have a number of partners from all different jurisdictions working with different organizations, all of which have their preferred vendors and preferred solutions. And there's a real danger that we spread ourselves too thin and we try and be all things to all people. So we made a very conscious decision that we wanted to back one horse, if you like. It doesn't mean that we can't support projects with banks with other solutions, but we really wanted to have one kind of key vendor that we were going to sort of go all in on. And so we did quite an extensive market assessment. We looked at who the main players were, and we looked at what their capabilities and popularity was right now, but also where that future was moving to, with a very much a focus on AI and the next generation of payments. And so we wanted to find a solution and a vendor that we felt was going to be the right partner for us to invest in now, but also go on that journey with us. And there was one very clear winner from that assessment partners, and unfortunately they weren't available. So we no, seriously, we selected yourselves, and we've had some real success with it, and I 100% believe it was the right partnership. And it's a combination of capability and people. I personally know a lot of the Feedzai team from different companies I've worked with in the past. Like I said, we were both part of that same Lloyds alum. But so there's a real good core team of people. I often say if I was sort of creating my own ideal team, my A team are pretty much all sort of combined into Feedzai. So there's definite that. But then there's also the technology. And I've been aware of Feedzai since, I guess, Lloyds purchased them back in mid 2010s. I can't remember the exact year, but 2018, yeah, something like that. And I even sort of remember when they were launched sort of a few years before that, when we kind of first came across our radar. Similarly with the Revlock, I was kind of a part of the Revlock business when there were sort of four people in a sort of a room in Lisbon. I remember going to their offices and kind of having a tour. And obviously that then sort of got acquired by Feedzai. So I sort of the different parts of Feedzai I've been aware of for a very long time. And I feel that the technology really works, but it's also the people and the culture that is within the organization is a real kind of driver as to why we selected. I think it's easy to select on pure technology, but you really have to understand how that technology fits with the culture and the people and the organization to make sure you have that relationship that can grow.
Yeah, it's a huge part of how you take the technology forward in a way that evolves it to the state where customers in market want to adopt it, where it's going to solve the right problem for the consumer, right? And I think when we're thinking about how we take the product forward, how we take the roadmap forward, yes, there are going to be things that organically influence. You've got regulation that has to be adhered to, you've got customer feedback, but I think the way in which we think about the forward lens on the market and how we derive the product view with that lens, I think puts us in a really strong position in market to ensure that we're continuing to develop in a way that's A, the right pace, but B, in the right direction as well.
There's technology innovation that is happening, at an unbelievable pace at the moment. And with AI, the pace that it's moving now is going to be sort of pedestrian compared to the way it's going to move over the next decade. So there is absolutely a technology sort of element to this at the forefront, but technology is only as relevant as the use cases that you apply to it. And so having that real depth of practical business understanding of how that technology fits into people's day-to-day lives, that's key. I always think that fraud in particular is very much a psychology as much as it is a science. When you look at what we do as fraud professionals, there's a kind of a real mix of skills involved. So, if you think of going through an airport in security, you kind of have to take your shoes and your belt and your bags and things off. It's not necessarily because that's a very practical way of identifying terrorism or anything like that. But there's a psychology nature to it of flying is scary. So let's put some overt security at the front end to make people feel safer about going on a plane, that we've got the security in place. And there's an element of that in fraud, that you want to have enough overt controls in place to make people feel secure about using banking. In the same way, there's a whole load of psychology that goes behind the scenes to look for the hidden patterns, and so the real hard work is done in a very sort of covert, seamless way that manages the friction level so that people use their bank accounts or kind of whatever they're doing in a completely seamless, user-friendly way, but behind the scenes, all that work is doing. So all of that is technology underpinning it, but it's understanding the psychology of humans and understanding the psychology of consumers and making the bank work in that way that's really key. And that's one of the skills that someone like Feedzai has, is that kind of depth of experience at the coal face to bring that technology into a practical way.
We talk about friction. There's a whole range of different directions we can take this conversation, Gareth. So maybe I flip it to you as you're going out into market and you're interacting with banks. You're talking about the competency and the services that PwC offer, combined with that technology that Feedzai brings. As you're going and having interactions and you're learning from institutions, what are the big things that you're hearing that banks are concerned about? What are the perhaps the top 2 or 3 things that are very much high on your radar right now?
Absolutely. Well, number one, without any shadow of a doubt, is AI. You can't have a conversation without AI. And that's in 2 ways, I guess. One is very much in how can they automate and replicate human activity through AI internally, and how can they innovate AI externally to the consumer and where that goes. So that's without a doubt where that sits. The second point that everybody talks about is crypto and the digitalization of money, and how that payment ecosystem works. And I would say the third point is probably linked to those, is the kind of the future of banking and the future of money in general. So what are the trends that are going to influence the way consumers interact with their banks over the next decade? So it's very much forward-looking. Nobody is particularly talking about the past. No one's sort of patting themselves on the back, hey, we've beaten fraud. No one's particularly looking at even particularly at fraud trends necessarily today. I mean, everybody kind of accepts there's kind of 2 fundamental ways that we defrauded. Either they're impersonations, they're trying to be you and do an account takeover, or it's manipulation and they are trying to manipulate you into parting with your cash.
Whether that's authorized or unauthorized.
Authorized or unauthorized, yeah. Exactly. So I think everybody accepts those 2 are here to stay. And there's variations on them, but nobody's particularly kind of looking at that. Oh, there's this, if I go back 10 years or 5 years, everything was about, oh, there's this fraud trend, or there's that. I mean, remember back in the day when things like Zeus and
The malware strains,
all the malware was coming in, and everyone's like,
yeah.
getting excited about the specific sort of strain of malware that was landing. You don't really see that anymore. It's kind of, we accept that, romance scams are romance scams, and there's kind of 101 variations on them, but whether somebody uses Hinge or Tinder, it doesn't really make a difference. Whereas now it's very much kind of looking at where are we going in the future, and how does AI change the landscape for us to operate?
So if we perhaps break those three down then, Gareth, so the first one you talked about was AI. Now, AI is an umbrella term for different types of AI. So you've got machine learning, you've got generative, you've got agentic, you've got these different threads. The fraud industry's actually been practicing AI for many, many years, right? The concept of machine learning to analyze transactions in real time, detect anomalies, look for deviations away from norm is something that our industry has actually been quite forward thinking on. Credit risk and other departments in financial institutions have been using it as well. But so whilst it's new to many, many people, it's actually not new to our domain per se. So we've had this concept of machine learning. It can analyze, massive amounts of data at scale, spot those intricacies, be trained on historic fraud events that have occurred, and then spot similarities as similar events occur in future. We've always had that then supplemented by business rules, and I think you'll always need that.
Absolutely.
That relationship between them. You've now got this kind of new layer of AI coming in, generative AI, agentic AI. My observation is the banks and the industry hasn't necessarily found a home for that yet in terms of, where it sits within the ecosystem. Does it come pre-transaction to be able to, analyze marketplace ads, or, emails to look for sense of urgency and CEO risk and things like that? Or do you use it further down the stream and in the investigative phase where you're summarizing data within a case manager and you're deriving insights out from that, and perhaps you're going to fetch additional insights and summarizing that so it's easy for the operational agent to make a decision? What are you seeing in terms of where that new, let's say that new vein of AI is actually being adopted?
When it comes to fraud, we respond to what the end user does. So when cards went to contactless, then we had to adapt our fraud solutions to look at contactless cards. When new payment types evolve, then we have to adapt the detection around what the consumer is doing. So the real question is less about where we need to go from an industry defense from AI into where the consumer is going. And so you said, let's split them out. In reality, you can't really split them out because they are kind of combined together. So if you look at digital currency and the move into, say, CBDCs and stable coins, and the merging of traditional fiat currency rails and digital rails, then that opens the door into payments through agentic AI. So the really interesting thing for me is where we start giving access to the bank accounts to the AI systems. So let me give you examples of that. As an investment portfolio, for instance, rather than me sitting there with my Robinhood app or El Toro or Trading 212, whatever, what I could do is say, I'm using ChatGPT because that's the kind of the most famous, but you could use any of these AIs or some bespoke ones. I could say, track Warren Buffett's investment strategy in real time. And AI goes away, and every time Warren Buffett makes a bet, it makes a bet on my portfolio. Every time it sells on my portfolio, and I sort of come back in 100 days and see how my account has behaved. I haven't instigated any changes. I haven't sort of bought or sold anything, but all the trading has been done by AI, replicating Nancy Pelosi or Warren Buffett or whoever it might be, whoever I can sort of set out there. It's an interesting concept. Or to give you another example, obviously we flew out to Vienna. I had to go and book my flights and pay on my credit card and put my expenses through. But I could go to AI and say, right, I need to be in Vienna on this date. Find me a hotel, find me a flight, monitor to see when the flights drop to their kind of lowest cost, and book it. And I set that going. I go away and get on with my day. And then when I come back, I check and I find that at 2 a.m., the BA price drop had occurred, and ChatGPT had purchased my airline ticket, had booked my hotel because there was a Trivago deal going on, and I've got my everything has been booked for and paid for, and I turn up and everything is on my phone. I haven't done anything. It's all done automatically because I've given access to my bank account to my machine. But those are quite simple examples. There are many, many kind of, once you start getting into this and go down this rabbit hole, you could go into a whole load of ways. But then it becomes interesting from a fraud detection perspective. If as consumers, we enable AI to transact on our behalf, then suddenly a lot of that detection that we do, which is looking at human behavior, whether they're being manipulated or whether they're being taken over, becomes now something that you have to look at the behavior of machines. And, we've all been there clicking on traffic lights or bicycles to say we're not a robot. Well, by design, this becomes robots. And because BA and Trivago and the hotel group have also used AI to replicate humans in the booking process at their end to streamline the operations at their end as corporations, then suddenly you've got a machine sending to a machine. So now we've got an AI system detecting an AI sending money to an AI, and the humans are almost out of the equation. But it becomes a really fascinating kind of future that we could go down.
As you describe that, and then I think about what you said before about how you categorize fraud, you're still primarily going to be dealing with those two core buckets of
Absolutely.
authorized and unauthorized. But the difference is it the AI that's being manipulated by another AI?
Exactly.
And then the AI is trying to defend against that manipulation, or has somebody taken over your programmatic method of creating that interaction, and therefore the AI is doing something in an unauthorized way?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's going back to kind of resetting to how we were kind of a decade ago, but with the next generation of technology. So, there are we mentioned Zeus a little while ago. We were there when malware was a big thing, and now again, malware could come back with a vengeance to try and manipulate AI and manipulate the data, because the AI itself is only as good as the data is trained on. So if you can interject malware into that training data, then AI performs in a way that the malware dictates it to perform, rather than how you as the consumer want it to perform. Similarly, when we look at the behaviors of the system, we can sort of again still look at those two methods. Was it you, and or were you being manipulated? But again, if my if my AI Tinder robot falls in love with your AI Tinder robot and starts sending money, and we don't even know each other, but there's an AI catfish that's kind of catfished my AI, or you've created an investment portfolio that's designed in order to trigger AI investment before to manipulate them, and then my investment sends money to your investment portfolio. Again, it's the same concept as what we've done as humans, but now it's done by robots and machines. It's a super interesting.
It's an interesting paradigm.
It does. It kind of blows your mind a little bit when you start kind of going into it.
A really key part of this, I assume, is going to be the rails in which these transactions take place, right? So it's no longer thinking about traditional faster payment rails. It's how do we move into a world of digital currencies? And this is a key kind of foundational piece of the puzzle, right?
Absolutely. This only works with digital commerce, with digital currency. If I've got £50 in my pocket, then there's no AI system in the world that can do anything with that. It needs to be digital currency, but it needs to be fully digital currency, as opposed to today we've got digital currency today. If you think about it, we've got mobile wallets, we've got internet banking, we've got contactless payments, we've got Apple Pay, we've got all of these digital ways of paying. But the way it works today is that it sits on Visa, MasterCard, Amex rails. It sits on faster payment rails. It goes through SEPA and BACS and all of these sort of different systems. In the US, you've kind of got ACH and all of
Zelle
these
and FedNow
but they're all kind of digitalized version of traditional payment methods and payment clearing houses and so on.
They're still siloed.
This is
they're
siloed.
Not globalized.
Exactly. And going forward, you need these digital rails. Now, it's not crypto. I think a lot of people confuse it with crypto. It's crypto technology or crypto-inspired technology being used by central banks and the traditional banking network. So it's regulated institutions using crypto technology for a digitalized payment method. And because I think a lot of people kind of have a a fear of crypto, and I think others kind of believe that crypto is everything, and CBDCs or anything like that is sort of the complete sort of antithesis of what they're trying to do with their kind of crypto bro journey. And the reality is, it's kind of somewhere in between of all of that. It's where you have regulated industry, regulated entities using the technology that's been developed and inspired by crypto in order to take what they do today to the next generation and to the next level. And that then, when that exists, that allows agentic AI and agentic commerce to be able to be fully utilized in the way that, and I think it's inevitable. How you identify yourself on whatever way you call it and give that enrollment permission to agentic AI, there's going to need to be a new technology built based around that, or not new technology so much because we already do that, but there's going to be an enhancement of what we already do there. And then there's looking at the payments. And again, we already look at payments using AI to identify fraudulent payments. But a lot of the indicators that we currently use around, how you move your mouse, how you kind of enter your password, how you move from screen to screen, that kind of bot detection, if you like, that kind of says this is human versus this is robotic. We're going to have to accept that now robotic is the human, and therefore we're going to have to lose some of those existing indicators, but back them up with some new indicators. And there's no doubt a whole load of kind of virtual device information that can be connected to that ChatGPT that we can kind of connect in to our detection methods, because the whole point of agentic AI is that it adapts and learns to become you. So when I ask a question of ChatGPT, it gives me an answer that is aligned with the other questions I've given it in the past. If you ask that same question to ChatGPT, it will align with what you've done. So it will give us a slightly different answer. If I ask, I'm going to do a podcast, what should I speak about? My ChatGPT might say, well, as a PwC employee, you should talk about this because that's relevant to PwC. It would say to you, as a Feedzai employee, you need to be pushing your Feedzai product, etc., because it's learned with what we're going. So there must be a lot of indicators in there. And if we can build those indicators into our detection engine, then the detection keeps evolving to meet these new criteria. It's not so much, although I think that agentic AI in itself is a revolution, I think that it's going to be a staged approach, and that staged approach is more of an evolution. And I think we have the building blocks there to do this. And this is one of the reasons we threw a lot in with Feedzai. I mean, it's at its core fundamentally an AI system, and that AI is constantly learning to human behaviors. So it stands to reason that it can also constantly adapt and learn to non-human behaviors, and that's ultimately where it's going.
Yeah, Gareth, fascinating insights. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us. Look forward to the continued collaboration between our respective organizations, and super curious and excited to see if these things that we're talking about actually bear out in reality over the next 24 months.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. I think the next 10 years in particular is going to make the last 10 years look like nothing.
Pedestrian pace.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Dan. I enjoyed it.